Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's our host for this week, Russell Martin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. I am Russell Martin, one of your hosts. I hope you've enjoyed our conversations that Brent had last week. But this week, we are going to jump into a conversation that you may be dealing with or you may deal with at some point, is how do you keep ministry going in between youth ministries? How do you keep ministry going in between youth directors? Or how do you build a youth ministry, maybe if you are just the pastor there and you have maybe a few volunteers? And so we have with us my friend, Kevin McMachen. And Kevin is a pastor nearby. I was about to tell you all his details, but I'm gonna let him do that. But that's what we're talking about today. Kevin is a pastor at a smaller church, and they no longer have a youth person. And he's trying to figure out what to do next. And so we're going to talk through that process because I think it may be helpful for any of you who are going to be pastors, or if you are just coming out of that situation or going into that situation, may be helpful for you as well. I also know we have those who are volunteers who listen, who are church leaders who listen. And so hopefully you'll be able to glean something from this. But first of all, Kevin, tell us who you are, where you're at, how did you get to where you are right now in your ministry, in your life?
Well, I'm Kevin McMachen. I'm the pastor here. I like to say I'm the senior pastor at Highlands United Methodist Church, but I'm the only one here, so I guess that makes me senior. But yeah, Russell's fortunately got an associate, so he can say that more confidently.
I can say that.
But yeah, I was appointed here in 2019, and when I got here, the church had was in a decline, like many churches are right now experiencing. Of course, COVID really hurt us. But one of the things that I saw when I first came here is the lack of youth ministries here. I found in my own experiences that getting volunteers for little kids is usually a lot easier than big kids. And so when we were looking at where we needed to spend money, we decided that we would spend money on the youth and hired a youth director. And she did a wonderful job for many years. And she came in, I think, October of 2019, and was with us until last week. So it's still very new. And she built and maintained a youth program in the midst of a global pandemic. So, there's a lot of people that can say they've built a youth program, but there's very few that say they can do that they did it through a pandemic. So I applaud her for everything she did, and we were really sorry to see her go. But now, because of the pandemic and other situations, we are in a position where we can no longer afford a youth director. And we have this youth program that's left with us, and we got to figure out what to do. And as with many pastors, that role falls on you when there's nobody else to do it. And so you have to make a choice. You as the pastor need to either buy in and jump in and do it, or find somebody else to do it, or do nothing and let it die. And those are the options that you have. And I think that youth ministries is something that is often more neglected than a lot of other ministries. The importance of it is really neglected. Even churches that have youth ministries in their programs, often they're pushed to the side, where they hire somebody to do it, and then it's pushed off to the side. And the church is happy that they have it, so they can say, yes, we have a youth program, but the church does very little to support it other than have somebody that's hired to do it. And that's unfortunate. And a lot of it may be because maybe people are afraid to identify with them, or maybe they just don't think that they'll be appropriate, or they don't connect with them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's something that's just as important as homeless ministries or elderly ministries or anything else you could think of.
And I think Oh, sorry. I think it's refreshing probably for some to hear a lead pastor, senior pastor, even if you're only one, who's at a church saying that. And you can go back and listen. Anybody who's listening to this can find Sam Halverson's podcast, and he talked about whole church ministry and how not to just separate the youth off into a building or a deal, but involve them in the ministry of the church and look at it more as they are part of the church. Once they're confirmed, they're actually voting members of the church, and that they have that importance of stepping into the life of the church and not being as separate. So when you're looking now, you had a youth program. Well, first of all, tell us what is like numbers, schedule, like just some general thoughts on maybe what y'all did before your youth director left and what you're kind of dealing with as you begin to rebuild or to reestablish your youth program. Or keep it going.
The majority of our youth that we had, or that we have here, were seniors last year. 60% of them. So a lot of them are going away to college. We have some middle school youth as well, but like I said, we went from 0 to about 9 every week for the most part, and then over the summer it's dwindled to about 4. But that's anybody that's been in youth ministries knows summer is the dead time except for camp. You get everybody there for camps and stuff, but then regular meetings, they're off swimming or they're doing things for the summer, and then they get back into the swing of things in the winter. So school's about to just start here, and I'm expecting that we're going to have somewhere between 5 or 6, like that, 5, 6, maybe 7 actual youth showing up. At least I hope, as school begins and we start revamping this. But the majority of our youth were seniors, and many of them are sticking around. And so one of the things that I've recognized is there's not much in the way of transitional ministry from youth to adult. And so I'm thinking that the youth program might be divided into 2 different ministries that happen simultaneously. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a little bit more authority to the seniors into mentoring the youth. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. I guess I'll give you feedback on that later, but that's I need help. That's the big thing. I can't do it all myself. And here's some people that were active members of the youth program that are now out of youth. So what do you do with them? I say you put them right back into serving the youth. So that's kind of where I'm going with it right now, at least my intentions.
Well, and so that would be like, so what are some of the other, you've got to be sitting there thinking, all right, summer's coming, summer's ending, school's coming back. So one of your issues you're dealing with is the fact that you have a smaller group because they graduated, like you said, and you've got these students who just graduated who are available and I guess they're going to college locally or not going to college or whatever, for whatever reason, they are still around. So what are some of the other big pieces that affect your ministry?
Volunteers.
Okay.
Volunteers are the biggest thing. And I don't know who's going to be listening to this or what level of experience they'll have in pastoral ministry. I've got 3 years in pastoral ministry, but one thing that I found in the 3 years as a pastor and the 15 years I served as a lay person in the church, asking people from a microphone in front of the church to volunteer never gets volunteers. I mean, maybe once in a while, but realistically, if you want volunteers, you need to go up to people and ask them. Pray about it, allow God to lead you to those certain people that God identifies for you, and go up to them and say, hey, look, we've got this ministry going on, and I think that you're the right person to help me with it. Would you be willing to help me? And allow God to work through them, because often that's not what happened to me. And that's how I got involved in youth ministries. I didn't want anything to do with that. I was sitting in a Sunday school class, and the youth director, Susan Sanders, you know her really well. She comes up to me in the Sunday school class and says, hey, I need somebody to teach the youth Sunday school class once a month. Can anybody step up? And then she gives me that look that only Susan can give, where she looks deep into your soul and doesn't allow you to say anything but yes. And and I said yes. And then that launched into UMArmy and Big House and 30-hour famine and everything else that youth do. And so volunteers is a big thing. And a lot of times the reason why youth don't connect to the church is because we're not reaching out. The youth programs aren't reaching out to the church, not going specifically to people. Maybe they'll go in front of the church and say, hey, the youth are going on to camp, give us money. And that's not connecting them.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, as we talk, the whole podcast is talking with you as a small church pastor with no youth director and, limited volunteers, currently kind of rebuilding. So we're going to touch on a lot of different topics. Ignore my dogs in the back. We're going to talk on a bunch of different topics because you're kind of combining a lot of things. So volunteers, one of the things I thought you said that was good was when somebody asked you, they talk about incremental steps. Like she didn't come and say, hey, I want you to spend the next 9 years of your life volunteering in youth ministry and you're not going to have any fun, you're not going to do anything else. She said, hey, once a month, I want you to consider helping. Yeah. How did that help you get involved?
Well, I mean, first of all, when I first considered it, I was like, well, I was a pretty new Christian, and I was like, how am I going to be able to help these kids? How am I going to relate to them? And then she said that she'll give me a lesson plan. All I got to do is read through the lesson plan, allow them to answer questions. And the next thing you know, I really connected with the kids, and it was building those relationships that really drew me in. The next thing you know, I'm doing it every week instead of once a month. And then one of those youths, who actually ended up being my youth director, came up to me and says, why don't you go to UMArmy with us? And so I went to my first UMArmy, and I think I've been through 10 or 11 of them since then. And so yeah, it's that step in. It's like a person stepping into the church for the first time. If nobody says hi to them, they probably won't ever come back. But as soon as they build that relationship with one individual, that's what keeps them there. What kept me in my former church, my sending church is what we pastors call the church that sent us out into ministry, was actually, who is now my best friend, Sheridan Sanders. We went to church, we visited, and we were about to leave. And he says, what are you doing? I said, oh, we're probably going to go get something to eat. He goes, no, you're not. You're going to come to my Bible study. And didn't even give us a chance to say no. He just said, you're coming. And because we went to that Bible study, we got to know the Sanders very well. And we became a part of the church. It's really through relationships that ministry grows. Now, maybe digressing a little bit, going into how am I going to build this ministry, especially when I have limited volunteers. Well, one resource that we often overlook when we're looking at ministries like youth ministries is that these youth are members of the church too. They are resources that can volunteer in their own ministry. You don't have to make the game or the lesson plan every week. Quite frankly, I'm not going to have time to, but you know what? There's some youth that might be just right for that. They can say, okay, next week, I want you to be in charge to pick the game that we're going to play. And I want you to be in charge of the scripture we're going to talk about, and give them authority. They should have authority. Trustees, the trustees committee at churches, right? The one thing that they always say, because it tends to be older people on the trustees, is where they wish they had younger people. Appoint youth to the trustees. They can literally be part of the trustees. Appoint them. There's no limit to how big the trustees can be, but how empowering is that to allow a youth member to be a member of a church council, and their role is to help maintain and build the church. That's cool. So anyway, that was a
Yeah.
little different.
Well, so you mean, so you kind of talked about volunteers. You talked about bringing, the youth can be those volunteers. And so I've heard, we talked about incremental steps was the first thing. The other thing that I heard that helps you to get involved, and this may just be this podcast may end up being, how do you equip, find volunteers and get ministry to happen? Because reality is in a small church. Like I know this, I'm in a smaller church. Reality is like, you don't have a wide base of money to go buy or to hire, to buy services, to buy things, hire staff. Like, I know I came from a larger church and our children's ministry was down the hall. Our music person was down the hall. They were all full-time people. We could have a meeting whenever we wanted to. It was just, that was part of the culture. You're always there.
Yeah.
I'm learning at a small church. That's not the case. We had a communications person. Here, our communications person is volunteer. Our youth, we do have a youth director, paid youth director, but he is bivocational. Actually, it's Ken Burns. He was on here a couple of weeks ago. So like he's bivocational. My business administrator is part-time. Like a lot of people who do the things, like our maintenance person is not a maintenance person. It's the trustees committee. It's all volunteers. Our hospitality, we don't have somebody who does food. It's all volunteers. And so like you do have to rely on those volunteers for even things that you might not normally think about, depending on what your church was. So like in youth ministry, a lot of times those same volunteers are going to be your same volunteers who are volunteers for other things. But one of you talked about incremental steps and getting people involved, but the other was whenever Susan was it who asked you to be a small group leader, she says, I will give you everything you need.
Yeah.
And I think that is critical if we're asking for someone to serve on a church committee somewhere else or work with the youth program, is giving them all the resources that they need and helping that. So talk a little bit about how that helped you. Did that make you more comfortable? Did you feel like it was restricting, or did that make you more willing? Like how would you tell someone else the importance of equipping your volunteers as you're asking them to build this program that you're building without a youth director?
Well, I think that it certainly made it a whole lot easier to do it. Knowing that if you're going into battle with just bare hands, you're not going to feel you're going to be very effective. But you give somebody a powerful gun, it gives them confidence going into battle. And maybe that's not the best analogy, but I think it works. I think it paints the picture well. And so providing the resources for individuals, for volunteers is crucially important. Now, being a small church pastor, maybe this is your first appointment. Maybe you don't know where all those resources are or how to get them. That can be overwhelming. You're not alone. If you're watching this and you're in Southeast Texas, I guarantee you there's resources all around you. And it may not even be the same denomination of the church you're in. It may be another denomination that has a resource that you could use. There's things that you can reach out to other people that have already done these programs before that can help you. Talk to people in your church and say, hey, look, what did we do before I got here? And get those resources, find them, make them available. And then that way, when you're asking people for help, you've got them. I often would still reach out to Susan and other people that I knew in ministry to say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you know anybody that's done that? And they would either point me to another individual that had that experience, or they would have the stuff for themselves already. And so it's very important to be connectional in ministry, to know that if you're doing it all yourself, it's going to be overwhelming. And especially if you're the pastor that's trying to collect everything for everybody and do everything, you're the one that's making sure bills are paid. You're the one that's making sure staff are taken care of. You're the one that's doing all of the sermons every Sunday and all of the, it's so easy to get bogged down with the things of being a pastor, all of a sudden important things like the youth get tossed aside. because there's other more important things going on. I mean, I have to find time to write a sermon every Sunday.
Yeah.
It has to be done.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's been Saturday night.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's been Sunday morning. Whatever.
Yeah. Haven't done Sunday morning yet.
I had it half written on Saturday and finished it on Sunday. But yeah, some you have to carve out time for things, and you can't do everything. But finding the resources, or at least the people that can help, connecting them to people, even if they're not part of your church.
And that, you're saying this from a perspective of a pastor who's at a church and you're doing the youth ministry. So, and we may have, many who are listening to this, and that is their situation. You are the youth director, but you're also the lead pastor, and you're also the custodian, and you're also the volunteer coordinator, and you're also, all those type of things. But I think it also translates to anybody who is starting in a new position, youth ministry, because they may be not in your position, but they may be in your previous youth director position where they're the only other one. Like there's a senior pastor and a youth person. And you're still doing these same things. You still don't have a communications person on staff. You still don't have a facilities person on staff. You're tearing everything up and setting down. You're making your own newsletters and doing those type of things. And so you still need volunteers, no matter if you are in a youth group of 9 or 900, you still need volunteers. And these are huge things to keep in mind about empowering those volunteers who help you do youth ministry, creating those incremental steps, and then equipping them. Another thing you mentioned was creating those relationships. So your volunteers come through relationships. Talk a little bit more about that and the importance, especially in a smaller church like yours, where you can't just go hire 3 youth interns to work for you in the summer. What are some of those ways that you are able to, the importance of those relationships and how those carry through as you're building, in our case, a youth ministry, but that actually would apply in any case?
Well, I think that the big thing is connecting the youth themselves in relationship with the church. That's the hardest thing to do. And oftentimes it's trying to convince them to join other parts of ministry, giving them authority to do things in the church. Like I said, putting them on trustees. I would love to have a youth on our administrative council, because how cool would that be to bring their perspective into the discussion. But,
no, I do want to pause you for a minute and let everybody know, not every denomination has the same rules about who can have authority or have voting, or so there it may be different. We're both in the United Methodist Church, and so our book of discipline and ways do allow for youth input on a lot of things. I'm not sure about other denominations, so I just wanted to kind of throw that out. Yeah. But your point is still taken. Still seek their, if it's not an official capacity, no matter what, still involve them in anything possible that they can do that your denomination allows you to do, or your church allows you to do. Would you agree?
Let's take the Boy Scouts of America, for example. When a kid gets into 3rd grade, they hand the kid a knife. They teach them how to use it, but they give a 3rd grader a pocket knife, and they teach them how to be responsible with it. When they get to 6th grade, they are the leaders, the adult leaders of the troop are no longer leading them. They're a resource for them, and they lead each other at 6th grade. And we need to be the reason that we're struggling with new leaders in our youth and stuff as they become adults is because they don't get experience in leadership. And how empowering is that? How wouldn't you love to be a part of a youth group that creates and leads their own ministries? And when I was helping with the youth back at my sending church, I had an individual come up to me and say, "Hey, the youth want to do something for the homeless." I said, "Great, what are you going to do?" And they said they want to bring blankets to them for the winter, because it's supposed to be a cold winter. And I said, "That's fantastic. How are you going to do it?" "Well, I was wondering if you could help us." Say, "No, I said, no, this is your project. I will support you, and I will get others to support you, but what do you want to do? They said that we want to approach the church and see if we can get donations for it. I said, okay, go talk to the administrative council, propose it to them, and see if they'll allow you to go in front of the church and do that. Well, they did that. And then they went in front of the church and they asked, and they delivered over 500 blankets that winter to the, and I could have easily said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let me lead it. But what it did is it allowed an individual to see that the Holy Spirit can work in them and to build up ministry. And not only will they be able to accomplish it, but God will show God's abundance in it and give them more than possibly they can handle. 500 blankets is a lot of blankets to distribute to the homeless downtown. The youth had to reach out to the adults and ask for them to help them take these blankets down to the homeless downtown. And all of a sudden, through that, giving them authority like that, help them to reach out and build relationships with adults. But maybe I'm digressing to other things.
No, you're good. Because that was like we were talking about, incremental steps, getting volunteers involved, and then those relationships, building those and using youth ministry. Because in a smaller church, like I said, you don't have you can't just hire the stuff. You have people who are volunteers, who are doing the ministry. That fits right in as far as I think the other thing too is, a lot of times everything's so separated in larger churches that here the same person who's your youth volunteer may also be the organist, may also be piano, whatever it is, may also be on a praise team, may also be the church secretary. Like,
was it they say 3% of the church does 90% of the work?
80-20, 97-3, whatever. But yeah, but that creates some relationship opportunities for people to, maybe, hey, well, have you thought about the praise team, and cross relationships with those type of things, or Bible studies or things. So what are some of your other, like, your biggest questions? I mean, you're facing this. You're about to launch where you would start a new program, but you're the lead pastor, and there is no youth person. So what are some of your other big questions that are kind of pondering in your head? Like, how am I going to do this? Or I'm afraid of this, or whatever.
How am I going to find time to do it? That's probably the biggest question. And now I led as a youth director, as an interim youth director for a couple months. So really doing it as a vocation is not something I've been doing. I think I can do well at it. I'm more called to lead a church than I am a youth group. But when you're the solo pastor of a small church, you've got to be flexible. You've got to really lean on the Holy Spirit to guide you in ministry. And all of a sudden, I mean, we don't have an administrative pastor. We don't have a preaching pastor. We don't have a pastor in charge of Christian education, a youth pastor, and all these other. They got me. They've got me, and the day-to-day stuff, that's me and my administrative assistant. I'm lucky to have an administrative assistant that works 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. But the remainder of that is me. When the website has issues, it's me. When the internet goes down, it's me. And I end up running into all of these distractions and hurdles trying to keep the church going. So my fear, my biggest struggle is rounding out time to do this, because I've also got to spend time with my wife and my kids. I've got to spend time for myself. I'm an avid bowler, and I took bowling off of this for the summer, and I'm missing it tremendously. I need to find some time to go bowling.
Yeah. And I think that's a word for anybody watching this, is just that you could easily, one, you don't have enough time to do the things you need to do that your job requires, or to do them fully like you would want to. And so the tendency is, well, we can push our vacation back here, or I can not go bowling and spend that time with friends, or I don't need to sleep or eat. Like, it's so easy to push aside our own needs that help us to go and do and be in ministry, to push those aside so we can take care of the stuff that needs to be done. And so, and that's, like I said, that's for pastors, for youth directors, for volunteers, for parents, for anybody.
If you're in ministry, ministry can be life-sucking. It literally can, if you let it. But if you measure out your time, and they call holy care, self-care, holy care, that Jesus himself, Jesus tried to get away from a crowd, and in Matthew, they followed him, so he preached to them and he fed them, and that's the feeding of the 5,000, right? And then he's like, okay, last time he tried to get the disciples to dismiss him, and they just followed him. So he sent the disciples out on the lake and dismissed the crowd, and he went up into the mountains to be by himself. Now it says he went out to be by himself, but we don't know if it was. Eventually, Jesus decided to go walking on the lake where nobody could follow him. Jesus needed time by himself to take care of his soul. And we need the same thing. Jesus gave us the example that we need time to pray, time to reflect, time to just be who we want to be. And we can't allow ministry to do that. So that being said, my goal is to carve out 3 hours a week for youth. 3 hours. That's an hour for the time that they're going to be there, and 2 hours of planning. And I need to figure out when that's going to be, and I need to put it on a schedule that says from this time to this time, I'm planning youth. And on this time each week, I'm doing youth. And you have to carve out that time and schedule it.
Yeah. What, Eli? I'm almost done. Okay, bye. I'll be back in a minute. All right. Well, so we have talked about small church and the challenges you are going to be facing. And I think it's a good plan. I would suggest to anybody who watches this, if you have any thoughts, because you may would like to build a community so that way it is not just, we don't just get people who know everything out here. We have people who are asking questions and figuring it out, and we all have things that we're trying to learn. Like, we're all learning from different ways of doing things. I know Kevin and I both are in the same kind of situation now, being lead pastor. I've been doing this since 2020, so he's been going a little longer than I have. But it is figuring out
ministry longer than I have, though.
I've been in ministry longer. I've been a vocational minister longer than you have. But so, we've talked about, all the things we've talked about are key for any ministry. But I think it's a unique situation, realizing, a lot of people who may be listening, or churches may know, okay, they're waiting for another youth leader, or they're hiring a youth leader, or they have one. But I'll encourage you, any of these things we've talked about, there may be a period of time that you may leave your youth ministry, and these would be things to help your church as they're in the in-between time. Yeah. I know churches who've spent 6 months or a year or 2 years or even longer looking for youth leaders. And if you don't keep things going, then they typically will fall off. And so it's not just your youth leader who needs to know how to do volunteers, or how to run programs, or how to create, ask for other volunteers. It's all those who are involved in the ministry. So whether you are a lead pastor who is looking for a youth director, or if you're one who knows you're not going to get one and you are it, or you are a volunteer who's in between youth leaders, all these things are going to be helpful for you as you continue to build. So one of the things I have talked about too is, like, we're a small church. We don't have this, which I understand. What are some of the benefits of being a small church?
Potential. Oftentimes, small churches are in a mission field where there's a high potential of growth, and usually a disconnect between the church and the community. So there's a potential for enormous growth. And a lot of that is, it's just like we were talking earlier about the disconnect between the youth and the rest of the church, how they get pushed off to the side. Well, the same thing happens with churches and communities. They disconnect with their community. They become this little thing that's pushed off to the side in the community. And so being a pastor of a small church is a great opportunity to connect with the community and find the ways that the church can benefit the community, and vice versa, the community can benefit the church. We are in mission to the world to make disciples. And what that means is that those disciples become part of the church and help the church to do its mission to make disciples. And as with anything you do, and whether it's youth ministries or board meetings or whatever it is, the metric I usually like to measure things are we making disciples? Is what we're doing fulfilling that mission, that the Great Commission from Jesus Christ to go into the world and make disciples? Because if it's not doing that, then maybe we need to rethink what we're doing. Is it not supporting the making of disciples? Yeah. Having a youth program just to let kids come and play on 1 day a week is not making disciples. We need to prepare them. There's a world out there that wants to eat them alive, and we need to prepare them. That being said, if you're around the Highlands Baytown area and you feel like you being called to volunteer to help build and maintain a youth program, come see me.
And that may very well be. But I think the question on the small church is because there are a lot of people who listen and who are in smaller churches, and that's just to help to remind them, yes, we may not have all the staff positions or the resources, but there are definitely some benefits. And it's not I think everybody's called to a task, and your church is there for a reason. And a bigger church may be in a bigger city or somewhere else for that reason, but there is a mission field that you have that God has put your church in that place for. And so be encouraged and know that you are continuing to do good work, and prayers for you that. So Kevin, anything closing up, anything you want to share, you didn't share, any final thoughts?
Nothing I can think of. Just be in prayer for our church and so many other churches that are coming out of this pandemic. Russell and I were talking yesterday that just about every church is a relaunch, is a new launch, because the mission field is significantly different now that we've gone through this. Very much of it is virtual, like what we're doing right now, and we need to, as Christians, reevaluate our mission fields and adapt. And I think it's going to extend to youth ministries, small churches, big churches. So share your resources. Plagiarism is a good thing. I said that the other day. Plagiarism is a good thing. Plagiarize things that work, that do well. If there's another church that has a ministry that you think would be good in your church, reproduce it, because we're all in this together, and it's all for one purpose, and that's to share the gospel.
I mean, stay within like legal guidelines and give credit when you can, but so I mean, I think that's one of the big things is, no matter who, pastor or youth director, whatever like that, is there are so many other people who are doing what you do, and who are in the same situation you are, or who have been in that situation. So whether that is like, I know Kevin's reached out to me as far as youth ministry stuff, because I'll be relying on you for stuff, because I've been in that and we built a program. And so no matter what you're going through, whether that is launching small groups, and you've never done that before, or starting a after school ministry, and you've never done that before, or, changing how you do something, there's somebody else who has gone through that, and someone else who would be glad to share that. So go to Facebook. We have a Facebook page, Student Ministry Conversations. But there's also a lot of other ones. Grow Curriculum as a Facebook page. Download Youth Ministry, your denomination, your other churches in the area. A lot of people are willing to share those insights. And so encourage you to reach out to those. along those same lines, Kevin, if someone wanted to follow you or get in touch with you, what's the easiest way to do that?
Go to humctx.org. That's Highlands United Methodist Church, Texas.org. That's usually the easiest way to get it. It's got our contact information. You can email me straight there from through the website. You can learn about our church and our ministries there. That's probably the best. And then you can also find us on Facebook at Facebook/HUMCTX.
And you can also sign up to be part of Kevin's volunteer team if you want to do that as well. So, all right, well, Kevin, thank you so much. And thanks for joining us. And everybody else, thank you for joining us. And we will see you next week.